The following is an encore presentation of stories from the Dooralong Transformation Centre. You know what Wednesday morning means? It means we're talking to Elliott, our guest this morning, from the Dooralong Transformation Centre, who's just been for coffee with Kath and Mick. Nice coffee, Elliott.
Fantastic coffee, thank you, Phil.
Yeah, you're a coffee person? Tea person?
Absolutely.
Coffee person, yeah. Oh, look, I was a bit disappointed at Dooralong. I went to your family day about 6 months ago and they'd arranged this sort of coffee wagon or something, you know, the mobile coffee, but it wasn't working, so there's no good coffee out there. Is that changed?
Oh, they do a lot of things well out there, Phil.
Yeah.
They can be excused on this
occasion,
I'm sure.
Yeah, it was no problem. I was just looking forward to coffee. Yeah. So how long have you been at Dooralong now, Elliott?
A bit under 4 months, Phil.
Yeah, so that's not too long, is it?
No, but...
probably seems a long time to you.
In this scheme of a lifetime, no. It's, 4 months, 120 days, whatever would you want to look at it.
Yeah.
But it's a fantastic place to be.
It is.
Big changes.
And the Central Coast isn't your normal sort of stomping ground, is it? You're not from this part of the world?
No, I'm not. No.
Whereabouts are you from?
Wagga.
Yeah.
Wagga.
Yeah, it's a long way away. Is Dooralong's famous spread to Wagga, has it?
Yes. Yeah, a lot of thought went into where I was going to go.
All right, so it wasn't just I'll go anywhere sort of thing.
No,
it was I'm going to research this and make sure I go to a good one.
Yes.
Good choice.
Yeah.
Good choice.
Thank you.
Okay, let's turn the clock back, Elliott. I can see, and the listeners can't, that you're sort of a young guy. So how long have you been in addiction now?
Active addiction in one form or another for the majority portion of my life.
Is that right?
Yeah, so at least 17 years.
So, looking at you, I know that must have been when you were at school when you started.
Yeah.
And was it drugs, alcohol, or both?
Or both, yeah. Depending on which way you look at it, alcohol is a drug.
Of course it is, yeah. Just seems more socially acceptable, doesn't it? I mean, the damage it wreaks is just as bad, but you know, it's legal. There are shops where you can buy it, and drugs, I suppose, is a bit under the counter, isn't it?
Correct.
Yeah. So you were still at school, and was it through schoolmates?
Schoolmates, social circles, yeah. A culturally acceptable activity to be partaking in, a rite of passage, as it were.
Yeah. It's sex, drugs, rock and roll. It's what teenagers do. It's experimental, isn't it?
That's right.
And most people pass through that stage without too many sort of scars, but you didn't.
No. It continued. It became excessive, and it also led to some pretty bad things.
Yeah. So we've talked to people on Wednesdays from Dooralong, and they were telling our listeners that, you know, they started drugs. Well, they seem to fall into two categories. I don't know whether I'm oversimplifying this. Some guys tell us that they started drugs because it blotted something out that was happening at home, and they didn't have to think about it. And others tried it not for that reason, but just because it was an experiment, but it really got a grip of them very, very quickly. Yeah,
I mean, it can be a bit of a rabbit hole if you really want to explore the reasons why people develop an addiction or become addicts, or maybe they have a predisposition to it. But and I can only speak for myself here, Phil. In my case, it filled a gap.
Something missing.
And it was some form of instant gratification for dealing with trauma or with pain of one sort or another. And you know, in the short term was a relief or a respite from that pain, but then obviously progressed and became something much more than that, where it perpetuated its own cycle of pain and difficulties in itself.
Yeah. Did anybody in the family take drugs? Were you living in that sort of drug alcohol culture?
Not so much the drugs, but the alcohol. Yeah.
So that was sort of an accepted part of family life.
Yeah.
So what age were you now when you first started the experimenting?
Drinking quite young, maybe about 12. 13 became quite regular and heavy around about the age of 15. And the drug use was partially hand in hand with the heavy drinking session. So maybe it's actually a little bit hard to tell, but maybe around about mid-teens. Yeah.
Did Mum and Dad notice?
Yes and no. That situation has its complexities within itself as well. Yeah.
And what effect did it have on your schoolwork? Devastating, I would think.
Strangely enough, I was able to manage.
Yeah. So the teachers didn't know.
No, I did quite well at school.
You were able to hide it.
Yeah.
So you leave school. What happens next to Elliott?
Working, partying, a lot of fun, or fun in inverted commas, as it seemed at the time.
You didn't think you had a problem?
Not at that point, no.
Nobody said, none of your mates said, Elliott, you're out of control?
No, it was somewhat expected of a young person in the lifestyle that I was leading, and being masked by possibly being the life of the party, as it were.
So at that stage, early 20s, life seemed, in inverted commas, okay. It was good.
Yeah.
Party time.
Yeah.
Party
time.
central.
Yep.
Yeah. When did it start to get out of hand for you then?
When I started to recognise relationship breakdowns and cycles which seemed to continue. I mean, I never had trouble finding a partner. I had trouble hanging on to a partner. And that was a pretty lonely, devastating place to be. And losing relationships with friends and family members. Not being able to hold down a job, doing well at most of my jobs, just not being able to hang on to them for very long.
So this was a pattern that repeated itself time and time again, until eventually you sort of asked yourself, is it me?
And that's a rather confronting question in itself.
In what way?
Well, I mean, if one is to make that admission that there is an issue, then the expectation is to do something about it. Yeah.
So how low did your alcohol and drug taking take you?
Multiple suicide attempts, homelessness, on only for very brief periods, mind you. Just being estranged from friends and family, having little to no money.
How long were you homeless for?
I'm talking very brief periods, a few days or a week at a time. But really being on the cusp of falling out the bottom of things. Yeah.
And obviously we're not going to go into detail, but attempts on your own life as well.
Yes.
Yeah. That's scary, isn't it?
Yeah.
And how long were you bouncing along the bottom there before you thought, Elliott, I'm going to have to do something about this?
I think I once again feel like I can only really speak for myself, my own experiences. I don't like to generalise too much. No. I ended up in Dooralong through a combination of factors, but mainly desperation more than anything else. But that cycle, in all its seriousness, probably went on for maybe 10 or 12 years, to answer your question.
Long time.
Yeah, long time.
Yeah. Hopelessness.
Yeah.
Helplessness.
Yeah.
How did you find out about Dooralong? Because I know you come from Wagga, so I mean, Wagga's a long way from Dooralong.
Wagga is a long way from Dooralong, and that's part of the reason
I chose it. Yeah, I can understand that as well.
But Phil, I'm fortunate enough to have a friend of a relative who is an employee, a paid employee of the Salvation Army. So that relative was able to make contact with that paid employee, and he recommended that I go to Dooralong.
Yeah. So you got in touch with your relative, and they sort of set the wheels in motion.
Yep.
Yeah. What was the trigger to get in touch with your relative?
Well, she actually did it on my behalf, and then presented me with the option.
She could see you spiralling out of control and possibly ending up dead.
Yeah, and she'd seen it enough times before. But they're really, I I don't actually know what to say to that, but yeah.
So she tells you about Dooralong. Were you immediately thinking, "Yay, that's the place for me," or was
No,
there some
absolutely not.
resistance there?
Absolutely not. Huge amounts of resistance. It's a very daunting prospect. Although it didn't make a great deal of sense at the time, the part of the resistance comes from the subconscious awareness that, you know, as we mentioned before, if I acknowledge that I have a problem, I'm going to have to work at it. I'm going to have to do something about it. I'm going to have to.
And it's hard work.
Oh, it's hard. Yeah.
So it's not something you would willingly do unless you realise that this is your last chance, sort of thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, did you? Your relative mentions Dooralong. Did you jump on the website and try to find out as much as you could about it?
I did a little bit of online research. I made a couple of calls, but it was more a self-exploratory process more than anything else. I thought, you know, I may not like it. I'm probably not going to like it. It's probably going to be a lot of hard work.
Yeah, undoubtedly.
But this is it literally is my last option, or was my last option.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because with those suicide attempts behind you, you know, the next one could be the end of it for you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you thought, given that choice, Dooralong seemed like a good choice.
Yeah. There was a split path. It wasn't a fork. There wasn't I mean, a fork in the road, but there were only two options, Phil.
Yeah.
It was binary. I either do this or I don't.
It's life or death.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Yeah.
You chose life. I'm glad you did.
So am I.
Yeah. Elliott's from Wagga, now living, of course, at Dooralong. You've been there now for 4 months.
Yeah, round about that, Phil.
Roundabout. Yeah. He was telling us of the really bad way in which he was before he went to Dooralong. So much so that Elliott was telling me off air that he doesn't really remember very clearly that first week, 10 days at Dooralong.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
You were so... Yeah, it's just an indication of, you know, in how bad a way you were.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, after about 10 or so days at Dooralong, when your awareness is sort of returning, what did you think of Dooralong?
Although I wouldn't like to admit it, Phil, I was pretty scared. It's a pretty confronting experience. And as beautiful as the landscape is, and as caring as the people are, it's pretty scary.
Scary for what reason?
Scary because I was confronted with the fact that my life needed to undertake some pretty major changes, and that was a very daunting prospect.
Yeah. It's going to be hard work.
Yes. Yeah. And also the community as well. I mean, there are a lot of people out there. There's, you know, somewhere between 120 or 150 participants out there. So there are a lot of people. There's a lot of activity.
Yeah.
At times there are a lot of noise. There is a lot of noise. Yeah.
And it's part of the sort of scariness of it. Is it because you know that you can't hide anything anymore? You're going to have to be honest with yourself and honest with the counsellors, and you can't kid yourself any longer, and you're going to have to find out who you are.
Sorry, for those of you who can't hear me slowly nodding my head at this point.
You're nodding. Elliott's nodding. Yeah. It's like discovering yourself, whereas before perhaps the drugs and the alcohol allowed you to sort of dodge those issues.
Yes.
But all the bad stuff which were not, bad stuff which we're not asking you to sort of share.
Yeah.
But the bad stuff in your life now is going to have to be sort of faced and confronted and dealt with.
Yes.
And that's daunting and that's scary.
Sure is.
Yeah. So, I'm a bit reluctant to ask the next question. How are things now after 4 months?
Okay, so just to clarify, I think I've been there a little bit less than 4 months, but who's counting? You asked me off air just before, Phil, that, you know, when did things start to seem a little bit better, and that was maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago that things started to look a little bit different.
So there's going to Dooralong initially. It's no magic bullet, is it? It's not like, all right, I found it and it's okay sort of thing. You've been at Dooralong for say 3 months, and have you been in two minds about whether to leave or not?
At times, slightly ambivalent, yes. When it all gets a bit too much and a bit too confronting. I have considered throwing it all in. In all honesty, yes, I have.
But for the last couple of weeks, what's happened, do you think? You know, what's your sort of light bulb moment in the last couple of weeks?
I guess it's got a lot to do with what we've learnt, or with what I've learnt along the way, and those learnings really coming together. So at Dooralong we address the mind, body, spirit, as it were, looking at emotional things, spiritual principles, taking care of our physical health and our mental health, and unraveling a lot of possible past traumas, the pain associated with that, and when all of those things come together as one, with God's help, it's starting to make sense.
So within the last 2 weeks, you've dared to hope that things are going to get better for you for the rest of your life?
I don't hope so. I feel so.
You feel so?
Yeah.
Yeah. Feel it in your very essence of your being.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good. That's really good, isn't it? Yeah. So what is it about Dooralong then?
It's a magical place, Phil.
Magical. Yeah. Something happens there then, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Perhaps it's hard to articulate and put into words, but something's happened and things are starting to fall into place for you.
Yes.
That's super.
Yeah.
And apart from that, you're also learning those great life skills like how to deal with anger, how to sort of deal with relationships, how to deal with grief and things like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they're life lessons we all need. It's not just for people who are in drug or alcohol addiction. I mean, we were talking earlier, these things should be taught at school.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah.
Wholeheartedly agree. Yes. There's some very, very valuable life lessons in there.
Yeah.
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 You mentioned God a couple of times. Were you a spiritual person before you went to Dooralong?
No, strongly resisted. Yes.
Why did you strongly resist?
I'm not entirely sure exactly why, Phil. I am slightly predisposed to having a very logical and analytical mind, so therefore the whole faith-based aspect didn't have a huge appeal for me at that point.
So you hadn't been brought up in a sort of Christian family? You didn't go to church or anything like that when you were a kid?
No. But
you had more of a scientific approach to things?
Yes, that's correct. And at Dooralong, it's a part of the program. It's a pillar of the program. It's we have chapel on Wednesday nights. We're encouraged to pray on regular occasions. We attend church.
So how did that sit with somebody with a bit of a scientific background and sort of a natural resistance to sort of faith-based principles? How did you react in those first few months to chapel night in church?
I did resist. However, I was encouraged. It certainly wasn't forced. I don't want to give anyone that impression. It wasn't forced. I was encouraged to employ open-mindedness more than anything else.
Yeah.
And I also came to the realisation at that point that everything I had tried to improve my life, as the way I saw it, hadn't worked. Everything I tried up until that point hadn't worked. And I took a quick look at the people that it had worked for, and they had told me, and they say, and they practice it, and it's very clear that faith is a very important part of that program, and it can't work without it. So I thought, well, if it's worked for them, it can work for me.
Nothing to lose.
And it was a slow progression. It wasn't a click of the fingers. It didn't happen overnight. It was an organic progression, but all I did was open the door a tiny bit, let a bit of light in, and the rest just took care of itself.
Yeah.
It's the best way I can describe it. I hope that made sense, or some sense.
I think
to
it
some of you out
probably
there.
made a lot of sense to a lot of Christians. I mean, yeah, some people are converted like that, and for others, and for myself, it was a process, and quite a slow process.
Yeah.
Of 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and that type of thing. But eventually, you accept.
Yeah.
Yeah. Elliott's been at Dooralong not quite 4 months, but it's only probably in the last 2 or 3 weeks that things have started to fall into place for him. So it's not been an easy ride, even at Dooralong. Hard work to be done. But these last 2 or 3 weeks, yeah, things are falling into place for you, Elliott, which must give you encouragement for the future.
It does. It does.
Yeah. So you go to church on a Sunday. You go to the chapel meetings.
That's correct.
Yeah. And how do you find church? Not having been a regular churchgoer.
So I attend North Lakes Church here. They're a very welcoming bunch, very lovely, and there's a lot of worse things to be doing than hanging out with a bunch of lovely, happy people on a Sunday morning. It's a great way to start the week.
Yeah.
As I mentioned before, Phil, it's not something I really had to force myself to accept. It's just about employing. Just keeping an open mind. Yeah.
And I don't think it's anything to do with intelligence or science, because some of the greatest scientific minds of the 20th century were Christians, and some of the greatest scientific minds of the 20th century weren't Christians. It's nothing to do with intelligence or scientific background. It's just a question of faith, really. And, so it's too early to say, I think. It looks like you're going to be at Dooralong for a lot longer yet, but where would you hope to be in, say, 6 months from now?
Maybe still at Dooralong in some capacity, Phil. The part of this process is that I'm beginning to have a little think about how I might be able to give back. Because having a full understanding of where I've come from and where I plan to be, I'd really like to be able to share that with someone else.
Yeah. And talking to you, it seems that we were talking earlier about other rehabs, that you've really benefited from this long-term sort of up to 12 months rehab. It sounds as if a 6 weeks course probably wouldn't have done it for you.
No, it wouldn't have. It wouldn't have.
No.
Yeah.
So you must be very grateful to that relative who recommended Dooralong, 5-6 months ago.
Yes, that being the catalyst to getting in.
Are you still in touch with that relative?
Yeah. And the other thing that happens, Phil, is that I'm very grateful each and every day to be taken care of and have all of my immediate needs met. In such a lovely environment, and it's a really beautiful place, just in terms of landscape, if nothing else,
Yeah, and you were talking there about being open to God. It's a great place to be open to God, because there's such beautiful countryside there, and the wildlife is amazing. And these mornings, I know it's frosty, but the mornings must be really nice.
They're beautiful.
Yeah,
absolutely beautiful.
Frost on the grass.
Bit of frost on the grass occasionally.
Bit of mist.
Mist and fog. We've got a couple of small waterways out there.
Yeah.
With the sun shining through and the mist on the water coming through the reeds, and
a glimpse of how it was meant to be before we messed it up.
Yeah, native wildlife and bird life on the water. It's beautiful.
Yeah,
it really is.
Yeah. And what about family? You still in contact with your family, Elliott?
Yes.
Yeah. So they come out to see you, and
they're pretty spread out. Yeah, I do have some relatives nearby. I have to give them a lot of thanks for continuing to be supportive, especially all that I've put them through. And yeah, I'm not sure what else to say.
They must be encouraged by your progress and proud of you.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty easy to be proud of somebody with a track record of like mine, Phil, because it's not all that great. So anything better than that benchmark is good. I think at the end of the day, all they really want is for me to be a little bit happier, a little bit more at peace with myself.
Yeah.
But I've got to the point now, I'm making so much progress that if I don't speak to them each and every day and tell them exactly what I've been doing, they find it hard to keep up.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And the other thing, we'll just finish with this perhaps, you were talking to me earlier about, because things are going well for you now, you've really got to guard against complacency.
Yes. I call it having my head in the clouds whilst having my feet on the ground, Phil. Living life as an addict, it is a life, and although it can become more manageable with the help of Dooralong and the faith-based program, Salvation Army, all the rest of it, I'm never not going to be an addict.
It's not a cure.
It's not a cure.
No.
It's not a cure. So to guard against complacency is it's impossible to do on my own. Yeah.
But you're in the right place to learn the skills, the life skills and the strategies that will help you manage that sort of condition for the rest of your life, hopefully. But like you say, it's always going to be a struggle every day.
Yeah. Hopefully it'll just get a little bit less noisy and a little bit easier.
Yeah, more manageable.
Yeah.
Yeah, we certainly hope that. We certainly pray for that in your life, a more manageable way of coping with your addiction.
Thank you.
Great. You've been listening to an encore presentation of the Dooralong stories, which can be heard live every Wednesday at 10 a.m. and repeated 8 p.m. Sunday and 1 a.m. Wednesday, right here on 94.9 rema.cc.